I'm Wes Upchurch, and I'm running for Secretary of State because I have a background in IT, in computer industry, and that means that I actually am in charge of the communications at the corporation I work for. So that's hundreds of people that rely on me to make sure that the communications are there, that all the records are available, that they can be found when they're needed to be found, and that I'm improving relationships with the vendors that we work with, as well as within the internal workings of the company. And I believe these skills would apply well to the Secretary of State's office. And it's important to note that this office is not a political office. It's an office that's a public servant. So it's important that the Secretary of State remains unbiased. And as a third-party candidate, I don't lean towards the right or to the left. So you don't have to worry about me rewriting ballot language. You don't have to worry about, unfair petitionings, like counting of signatures. You're going to find true fairness if you go with a third-party candidate. And it's important to realize that this is the position that counts the ballots. It's in charge of making sure that elections are fair and that there's no fraud. And that means that we need to be able to verify the elections and the people voting in the elections. And if elected Secretary of State, I'm going to work to make sure that those things happen.
Thank you. Republican Mitch Hubbard.
Well, thank you all for being here today. It's a great day to be here. Wish it wasn't raining quite so much, but it's good to be here otherwise. My name is Mitch Hubbard. I'm from Fulton, Missouri. I'll tell you a little bit about my family. My wife Denise and I met at Central Missouri State University over 15 years ago. We've been married for 14 years. It'll be 15 years in December we've been married. We have 7 children, 4 boys and 3 girls. We're very pro-life. We're very pro-family. I earned my degree in education from Central Missouri State University, went on to the University of Missouri, Kansas City, where I earned a Juris Doctor. I worked for the state of Missouri for 3 years, and I have business management experience. And basically the reason I'm running for Secretary of State is because I want to restore fair elections to the state. Each year, citizens just like you and I have the right to file a citizens initiative. In fact, our state constitution, the only place it says it says we the people reserve the right to do that. We reserve the right to file citizens initiatives. And if you meet all the requirements, get all the signatures that are required, then voters just like you and I have the right to vote yes or no on that. And I believe that voters have the right to know what they're truly voting on and not be deceived. Twice this year, in an unprecedented event, the courts, 2 different judges, ruled against our current Secretary of State that the ballot language that was written by that office was written with insufficient and unfair. Missouri courts define insufficient and unfair to mean this, that the ballot language was written with prejudice, bias, deception, and or showing favoritism. That is a high standard. The courts give the Secretary of State a lot of deference. And, the Secretary of State is the chief election officer in the state of Missouri. There is absolutely no room in that office for prejudice, bias, deception, or favoritism. And that is why I'm running for office. It is my pledge to you, and it is my pledge to all Missourians, that when I am elected, I will write fair and sufficient ballot language every time, regardless of the issue. It is not my place to manipulate ballot language to get the result I want. I trust you, and I have value in the voters. I have respect for you. You have the right to decide if you want to vote yes or no, and you should know what you're voting on. That's my pledge to you. Thank you, and God bless.
Bob McCartney.
Thanks very much. I'd first like to thank the Press Association for putting this forum on today. Y'all are on the front lines of keeping government open and accountable and responsive, and I appreciate very much you're doing that. In the past 3.5 years as Secretary of State, I've tried to bring reform and common sense to the office and make things more accountable there. There's this partisan tone we've seen in Jefferson City and in Washington that has a lot to do with squabbling and bickering and not a lot to do with getting things done. And so I've tried to bring my small business experience and business sensibility to the office to actually get things done for business owners and others in our state. We've cut red tape, we've saved folks money, we've saved taxpayers money by using online filings and other kinds of resources that are out in the business world that need to be in the government world as well. We've also worked to protect Missourians from fraud, and I'm very proud of our efforts in that, particularly seniors who've been the focus of scam artists. It's something that is an important part of the job and something we've done a lot with. You probably know that last month we also got a very big settlement for investors in our state 40,000 people had their money locked up by Wachovia Securities, and we were able to help them get $9 billion of that money back. And as the state's chief election official, we focused hard on making sure that elections are fair and accurate and that we can be proud of our elections in our state. My principle on this is very simple. Make it easier for legitimate voters to vote and harder for anybody to cheat. We've also provided access to information like never before by putting documents online. We have a wonderful, rich history in our state. You all know about that. And we've been able to let people have access to that in our office by using technology. So my first term has been about common sense and results. That's what I want my next term to be about as well. And I hope to have the opportunity to serve.
Thank you. Now ready for questions. I'll go ahead and ask the first one here. Missouri does not currently have a no excuse needed absentee voting period. In other words, if you're voting absentee, there's supposed to be one of several reasons why you can't make it to the ballot. I'm wondering, what is your position on adopting an early voting law that would allow people to vote in advance of the election without needing to have a reason to do so? This question first goes to Wes Upchurch.
Well, I feel that it's important that all voters are able to vote, and if they shouldn't have to give a reason, especially if it concerns private matters, as to why they cannot be there to vote on voting day. So on the election, you should be able to cast an absentee ballot for any reason without having to give an excuse. That's my opinion.
Ms. Hubbard.
Well, my belief on that is that I oppose that. I believe that we need to make sure that absentee voting is available for citizens who need that, but the more we expand that, the more problems we have. There's a group called ACORN. ACORN is a group that registers voters in this state and in other states. In almost every place that ACORN registers voters, there is voter fraud. They turn in fraudulent voter applications. And when you expand absentee balloting, it will increase the chances of voter fraud. Because most of the fraud that occurs in voting, I believe, happens through absentee balloting. We need to make reform in absentee balloting, not expand it, but to make sure that we follow the rules. If you're out of the jurisdiction, you can vote absentee. If you're incapacitated, such as in a nursing home, you can vote absentee. Based on religious beliefs, you can vote absentee, and other reasons. Even if you're incarcerated, if you haven't lost your rights, you can vote absentee. So absentee balloting provides the needs for voters to vote. But we want to make sure that we don't expand things so much that we increase voter fraud. And that is what happens, because basically, ACORN registers people that are dead. They register people who, the same person at different addresses, or they change addresses of the person. So if you register to vote and they give a false address, and your information is sent to that false address, they can vote absentee on your behalf, and you've lost your right to vote. That disenfranchises the voters. So I am strongly opposed to that. I want to reform our absentee voting law so that we make sure that groups like ACORN cannot commit fraud in our state, but that we still allow people in nursing homes and people who are out of work to be able to do that, particularly our military. We need to make sure they can vote. Thank you.
Bob McCartney.
Yeah, I've been a strong advocate of early voting. I think voting has two parts of it. It's like the two sides of one coin. One is guaranteeing access and making it convenient for people, and the other part is stopping any kind of fraud, and we've worked hard to do both of those things. Early voting only makes sense. 30 other states have early voting now. You can vote prior to Election Day with no excuse. 7 of our 8 neighboring states have this. I've asked the legislature every year to pass this. My predecessor, Matt Blunt, asked the legislature to pass the very identical bill. It still hasn't been done. It needs to be done. We should make it convenient for people to vote. I want to mention just something about what Mr. Hubbard said about ACORN. There's a lot of talk out there about voter fraud, and they talk about ACORN all the time. Be specific when you talk about these things, because that is not voter fraud. That's the system working. If someone catches an improper registration before it happens, before Election Day, we should say, congratulations, election official, you're doing your job. Keep up the good work. And we also should crack down on anybody who tries to do that. And we've done just that in our office by getting bills passed that strengthen the laws and make it harder on people who try to cheat. So let's just be specific about this stuff and use some common sense.